Welcome to Intelligent Think, the podcast in which we explore what makes ideas great, how we can make our thinking better, and why it's so important to share your ideas with the world. Plus, we'll talk to thought leaders and authors about their own ideas and experiences so you can mine them for gold nuggets that will help you on your own journey. I'm Verity Craft.
And I'm Christina Wedgwood.
And this is Intelligent Think. And our very first guest today, we are excited to welcome, is Stanley Henry, who some of you might know as the founder and managing director of The Attention Seeker, which is a global social content agency, if I got that right.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Some of you, though, might know him as the guy who on LinkedIn shares his insane business goals and then all the successes and learnings along the way. And probably even more of you know him as the guy who argues with his employee on TikTok. Would that be an accurate description?
Yep. Definitely.
But we know him as an awesome bloke and an author to be, who we're currently working with on his first book. So, hey, Stan.
Hey, great to be here.
Yeah. Well, I would say thanks for coming along, but we're in your studio right now. So
thanks for coming along. Yeah. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Nice. Stoked to be your first guest. This is awesome.
Yeah, well, it's exciting. I'm like, at least you know how the podcast game works.
That's
so it's less weird than inviting along someone who's literally never been on a podcast. So you're more experienced than we are.
I love
podcast.
it.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we were really keen to have you along because you are working on your book right now, which we're working on with you. And I think one of the interesting things about your book is kind of when you came along and wanted to work with us, it was partly because you knew that we wouldn't necessarily agree with everything that you said.
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess before we dive into that and kind of that process, I'd love to understand, like from your perspective, what made you want to write a book? Why was it important to get your ideas out in this way when you already have this crazy big audience and this platform? Like, what's making you go, I need to get my ideas out in a different way?
Yeah, I think that books are like, first of all, in marketing, everyone likes their own way of absorbing knowledge. Like, in when you put out content, not everyone's going to watch a 15-second TikTok, who's going to read a 9-hour book, who's going to watch a 2-hour podcast or whatever. Everyone has their own mediums that they enjoy. And books still hold such a massive weighting in the content world. Like no one thinks of them as content, right? They think of them as books, but they're just a piece of content that's like been around forever, but people don't think of it that way. So they still hold this like really high regard. The title of author still has a lot of weighting in the world. And so from a branding exercise, it made sense. And I mean, that's my game. Like our whole game is like, how do you brand yourself and bring that to life? So elevating my brand into that author space, creating a piece of content, or proving to the world we can do all types of content as well. And I've been a big believer in like not just trying to do it all yourself, like bringing in the best talent to help you with it. And we didn't have that talent in our team to be able to like do a book properly. And like maybe I could have done it, but it might have taken 25 years to pull it together. And so like by bringing you guys in was that idea of like, okay, we know we need to make this type of content. It allows us to steal the author title and be able to parade that around from a brand perspective, and then getting the right people to do it. But then also like once you have this multi-channel marketing strategy, like the more channels you add, just like the bigger everyone thinks the brand is too, you know? So we have all these other channels, but we keep doing more. Like we're not just resting on our laurels and doing one, so we keep doing more. So yeah, it was like, to be honest, like it was a branding exercise. But also the ideas that we're trying to communicate, probably the last point of doing it is I didn't know what they were, to be honest, and that's why working with you guys to help pull them out of me the right way. But I knew there was something we had that was somewhat unique, and if you can put it in this long format, it allows people to digest it the right way. Whereas I can never do that in an Instagram or a LinkedIn post or even a podcast. Like, even in this podcast with you guys interviewing me about it, there's no way we could communicate all the same ideas that we can in a book. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, if you think of like an audiobook versus a podcast, right? Like how long is an audiobook?
Exactly.
9, 10, 12 hours.
Yeah.
You just can't get to the same level of depth. And I suppose the other part is a book is you've done the thinking in advance versus right now we're all just thinking on the fly and coming up with the shit as we go, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's it. Like also the probably the last reason I wanted to do a book is just because I personally wanted to do it. Like I personally just wanted to be able to be part of this process. I'd love to be able to have the time to be able to write books fully on my own. But one, I didn't know what that even means. Like just working with you guys, I realized that the process isn't just like putting words on a piece of paper. It's way harder than that. But also just like that like one day in the future it'd be something, and I talked about this with you guys at the beginning, like this would be the first of many, just like putting out a LinkedIn post was the first of many in podcasts and whatnot. It's just the first of many books that we'd hope to write. Because I love reading books. Like I read heaps of them. I read 1 or 2 a week easily. And so for me to be able to also add to that library of knowledge, I think is pretty fucking cool.
Yeah.
And maybe you need to bleep that. I don't know if your podcast. I'm too used to being on my own podcast.
I'm sure I've sworn on all of them.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, good.
Sometimes I feel like I've become more of a potty mouth since becoming a parent, and I'm like, I don't think that's the way around it's meant to go as well.
I meant to tone it down.
See, I'm kind of interested. So when we talked about setting up this podcast, we were like, we'll do a discussion together and then we'll interview people separately so that it's like, one-on-one conversations. But I was like, for this one in particular, I kind of wanted both of us to be here because when you and I, Stan, first started talking about you doing your book, I was like, that's cool. I'm going to bring Christina in. And I'm going to warn you, she doesn't agree with most of what you say.
Yeah.
and so, see, I'm interested, like, from your perspective, and I feel like you can be brutally honest with Stan here.
Oh, for sure.
I will.
Like, what were your thoughts when we first started out on the project?
I think I said to you, this isn't necessarily always going to be fun. Like, it's not always going to feel fun. I said that to you first, but I think I did come clean with you
sure.
about that, Stan. Because, one of Dave's challenges that he always levels is we're not going to let someone put forward an argument that could fall over in a stiff breeze. And so I know I'm a bit of a skeptic. And I'm like, show me the proof, back up what you're saying. And often the sort of the slicker or more polished the little, suave sound bites are, the more I've got my guard up usually. And so for someone that I know is really good at short form and spiffy and, you've got charisma in spades, I was like, I'm going to have to, like, poke behind you with it and be like, make sure that you're not sort of doing you can't do one over on a reader in, like, 60,000 words. So I was like, we're going to have a bit of backwards and forwards here on me calling you out on things or challenging you. Like, I'm not always going to make it fun for you either. But I think, to your credit, you could recognize the fact that that was in service of a better outcome. We were going to end up with a better book because of that. So I'm also humble enough to, like, I definitely don't think I know everything. I just want people to kind of earn it, I think, if I'm going to believe their ideas. So, I think that was
what I deal with every day.
Yeah. I think it's great, like and I've said that plenty to you and yourself, like, but one of the reasons that our agency has done so well over time, in my opinion, is that, like, we're first to ask clients for, like, proper honest feedback from them. And, like, a particular client, we did our annual review of them, and they were just raving about us the whole time. And, like, at the end of it, we like told them off, like, that was terrible.
Yeah.
Like, what
nothing
use
helpful in there.
Yeah, like, there was no point in that. Like, go away and come back with, like, actual critiques, because you want us to be better next year. And if we're not, that's actually on you, because we're just going to keep doing what we're doing, and then you're going to get bored of it. And so, like,
and we won't know better if you don't tell us, right?
Exactly. So, like, I'm really big on feedback, and I knew that I needed someone to test the ideas. And, like, actually, even just seeing where we've gone to where we are now and how much more robust they are, it's made everything better in our content world. Like, it's this process of writing this book, what I found out was that it will help me, like you said, like, if you can get real slick with stuff, you can, like, sort of swindle people a little bit to be like, I'm so good at talking, you're just going to sign this contract. But then what it's done is it's, like, made me have to really, like, test my ideas out in real life. So I've, like, taken these ideas that I've, like, tried to sell to you, and then gone and seen some skepticism and be like, well, let me try them with people, get feedback back. And because we have that engine where we can put it out and get it back, I was able to come back and better articulate it as well. And I even know, like, like, we've done a lot and there's a lot of structure of the book already done. But I definitely know, because I haven't talked to Dave for a little bit, or you, that by the time we get it finished, it's going to look even different again, because the ideas have evolved so much, even in my head, as I've tested them with everyone. So, no, I loved it. I absolutely loved the process of, like, going through this. Like, even just that, like, the 5 stages concept we came up with, like, that was just, like, game-changing for us as an agency to, like, be able to put that into words. Yeah.
Right. So now you're going to have to share it because I haven't been part of this process at all. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So what's the 5 stages?
So, I mean, in a nutshell, they're just like what we're calling the 5 stages of attention. I don't know if we really got a good name for it yet, but it's there.
Work in progress.
But it was literally just my journey through gaining attention. And it is literally the linear process I took to gain all the attention, with the 5th stage being where maybe I could go into the future, but don't necessarily have to. And so they were my personal network, my dedicated single platform on LinkedIn, going broad on TikTok and Instagram, getting an owned audience through newsletters, and then the 5th one being like this global brand that everyone recognizes and knows. And working, how do we work through those stages? Like, what triggers you to move to the next stage? But I think the thing I found was the biggest benefit of that structure was you don't have to move. And that was huge, because like I would argue with my brother, being like, he's at stage 1, being like, why don't you go to stage 2? And he doesn't need to, because he has a very profitable, great business, which is awesome, because there's so many people at stage 1 thinking they need to because they see everyone else doing it. And actually, like, no, you just don't need to. Like, you don't need to. And I think that's probably one of the best messages will come out of this book, that you go to the stage you need to be at to achieve the goals you've got, and then leave it at that, and don't have the overwhelm of, oh, everyone else has got a newsletter and everyone else is doing TikTok now and Instagram. It's like, well, actually, you don't need to, mate. Like, just keep going networking. You know, my brother sits at the bar and meets people at the bar. You know? That's all he needs to do, and he's got an awesome business.
Yeah.
That's or awesome. Even stage 2, I think, is a really comfortable stopping point for heaps of businesses. It's sort of like the maturity levels almost, but what stands detached, I think, from is that 1 and 2 aren't immature either. Like, they might actually be all that you need.
Absolutely.
Unless you're going for, you know, Feastables, Mr. Beast kind of world domination.
And even with mine, like, my business was at stage 2 when we think about it. We had 12 staff before I went to stage 3. You know, and like, that's a pretty decent sized business. It's bigger than most businesses in New Zealand at stage 2. You know, right at the beginning of the journey.
Yeah, when we met, I think that's where you were at, was stage 2. You hadn't started TikTok. No. It was very much just that, and you already had a team, and and were running a good business.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. I also really like, because I was part of the initial planning workshops that we did. That's really different to what we worked out in that initial framework. And I think we said up front, we were like, this is going to be a starting point, and you're probably going to change it. But what I love is like how much that's evolved. Like, it's not just little tweaks. It's really like it's a fully different framework.
It's a really different book to what it was going to be. Because I think Stan started writing it and was like, this is fucking boring. Like, I don't even want to write this, let alone expect that someone's going to... It felt really handbook. So, like, he was writing a manual, and like, he wasn't inspired by that either. So I was like, what are the ideas we're trying to move here, not the step-by-step of how.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I started writing that, and I remember writing so much. I actually flew to Gold Coast to get away from work, to lock myself in a room and write. And then I wrote all that, and then I was like, oh, well, that's deleted. Like, that was a waste of $2,000 or whatever I had to do, and not going to use any of it, literally zero of it. But like, that was a great lesson to learn, that you have to go through that to know. Sometimes it's better to find out what you don't want to do, and then figure out what's left, and then go, how do we mold those great ideas? You know, kill all the darlings, as we keep saying. And
there's a humility to that, though. Where we meet a lot of authors who they're quite attached to all of their darlings, but they're really attached to the idea of like showing all their workings. They're like, well, I did this thing, so I have to demonstrate that it happened, or, you know, we have to put this bit in because it shows how smart I am, or, you know, like the creative ego kind of has to step aside and go, you know, we know where we want to get readers from when they start reading the book to when they finish reading it, and that's not actually crucial to that journey anymore. So there's credit to you also for identifying that.
It's
not comfy.
It definitely, like, I think it surprises people how much they write that doesn't make it into the book. And it's always like, we try and warn people a little bit of that up front, but you can't warn them that much, because otherwise we wouldn't have a business if we warned people how much they would actually write and then get rid of. But I think it's really, you're right, see, like, there's definitely people who will cling on to everything and their books are the worst for it. Whereas the more that you can go, well, that was just a stage in my learning or a stage in the journey, then the better off it's going to be.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I think all the best books I ever read, especially in like business books, they've only got one core idea that they're getting across, and my book started to like have all these other core ideas come about it, and it was a manual, as you said, like it was step-by-step instructions, which isn't even the best way to communicate those ideas. And I think the other reason why I was so okay with giving it up, not only because I read lots and I understand like what I like, but as a business, this is like telling stories is what we do. And we always talk about like one of the best things about creating short form content or like posts is that you can only put in what's necessary to move the story along. And if it doesn't, you got to get rid of it. And so when we were going through this process, that was going through my head. Like that scene's not needed. Like it doesn't tell anything. Like all of that knowledge is implied. Like just jump to here.
Yeah.
That was saying that it's quite hard for people to learn for sure. Even in our team, it's hard for people to learn. Like, oh no, I need that bit because that's showing him walking from point A to point B. But but like they understand because he's now in point B. Like,
and he hasn't mastered teleportation, so he probably walked there.
He probably walked there, exactly, right? So it's those sorts of things that are quite hard because you've captured it, and the same happens in video and everything. And I think, luckily, I like came up through this like business world building content that's short, and you have to cut everything out. Every second counts, every word counts. And then going into the long form, I was like, oh, I got more room to play. But actually what that meant is like, actually you're just going to cut bigger chunks. That was the thing that was quite surprising. Like, no, it's not like 3 seconds of video. No, it's like 10,000 words you have to delete.
It's not a sentence here and there either. It might be wholesale paragraphs or what you
it might have been
conceived as
30
a whole
hours
chapter
of work that you've got to get rid of.
Exactly.
The scale is just much bigger.
That's true. I remember, when you were writing your book, something very similar. Because obviously, this is what we tell clients all the time. And, but then when it came to actually doing it for yourself, you were like, but I know exactly how much time I've put into that. Like, do I really have to? And it was like, yeah, you've got to. Like,
it still sucks.
Necessary.
And then you hold on to them in like a parking lot thinking, I'll find something else to do with them. But 90% of the time you've moved on. But I can also see that I couldn't have got to some of the crystallized stuff that's in the book if I hadn't gone via that place. So, in hindsight, the value of it's apparent, but at the time it still sucks to put it down and keep walking without it.
Yeah, 100%. I'd love to hear from you, Stan, because, a lot of the authors that we work with are, they might be individual speakers or consultants, coaches, whatever. And so their ideas are kind of only their ideas, really. I'm interested to hear from you on how much, the team influence what's then going into the book.
Oh, a massive. We got an interesting dynamic in our team is that as the owner and founder, but also not the guy who delivers everything for clients, that I have a really good overview of everything as you'd hope to expect, but I don't necessarily do anything. And so I have to talk to the team all the time on what's working, what's not, how does these methods, and then I'll because I can sit back a little bit with my head up, I'm able to think through them all a little bit and find the patterns a little bit easier. And that's a role I play a lot on the team, is that I'll do that. I'll test some of them out myself on my own things, but I'm able to look at what everyone's doing and get a more cohesive view of it all. Whereas we take Connor as an example, he's in making videos, and he's producing videos, and it's hard for him to pull out and be like, oh, what's Nate doing in strategy? How does that apply and how does that flow through? It's a real hard thing to do. You're in the weeds. And he has to, because otherwise his video production will be bad because of it. So I haven't necessarily gone to the team, hey, I've got this idea, I need to figure it out for you. But I've been able to look at everything everyone's doing, feedback some stuff. I'll work with the book, and then I'll be like, oh, that's kind of good idea. So we'll try it in a pitch, or try it in a strategy, or whatever, and we'll articulate the words to the client. And that's how I've used the team, as opposed to going, hey, chapter 1 needs X, Y, Z, can you help me? Probably the only other person, obviously, the only other person that's really helped a lot in the book is Charlotte. And Charlotte is our head of copy in our team. So, her job is to interview. She interviews me twice a week, every week, to help me write all my posts for LinkedIn. And because of that, she has a pretty deep understanding of who I am as a person. But also, we workshop the ideas. And so she's able to take those ideas and then articulate them written, put them out in content so we can get feedback from it. So outside of that though, like the team, I haven't used the team in a way of going, please give me some answers, but instead of like put in the ideas we're working on, let the team machine like work through these ideas, and then what's the output of that. And that's been awesome. And because I have that unique position of see how it all works cohesively, like I then have that come back and I can articulate my ideas better to you and Dave and stuff.
How about your audience? Because I remember when we were first chatting about the book, you were like, I'm really keen to almost like crowdsource feedback on this, get input, which is kind of what we suggest all authors do. You're just in a really unique position where you've got a really big audience to draw on. I'm interested to know how you found that and how you've kind of approached getting some of that feedback.
Yeah, we started off getting very direct, just going, hey, it's my book, and blah, blah. And then like kind of and I think people might have been a little bit scared because to give feedback because of the position we held, and I don't want to criticize them. No, I love it. Everything's good. So instead we've been trying to present the ideas differently, like in a way of like get people to challenge the idea. They don't realize it's part of a book or it's mine or whatever it might be. Here's a concept, put it out in the newsletter or put it out in my post or talk about it and get the feedback that way. And then also, because I talk to so many people from it, like given I do all the sales in the business, I'm constantly pitching to new potential customers. This book is just communicating what we do as a business. That's all it really is. And so by every pitch I do, it's just refining the message. Like I can see, you can tell, like if you do sales, you can tell if something's landing with people as you do it. You know if they're staying with you or not. And so I've literally, like the 5 stages thing, I've said maybe, 200 times already since we've, maybe more to pitches, like bring it up in the conversation, or like why it's important to get to that stage 3. Why do you need mass brand awareness? Like what does that do? And being able to articulate that. So audience building, I first thought it was going, no, Derek, I want your help, like make this with me. Now I've gone, okay, you aren't really okay to do that with me because like they have this parasocial relationship with us, they love us, they don't want to critique us too much.
And they see you as the experts probably too. So, you know, what of value can they possibly contribute when you're like, you do this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. And then so by articulating it a different way, which is going, here's an idea, and then pressing buttons as I do a lot on my content, is just like being very prickly with my audience. They give me the feedback I need. And then it's just like, at the moment, it's been pretty, it's all just been qualitative data that we've just sort of been reading and then refining the message. And I think for me, the next stage of that is going, okay, how do we take all this qualitative data and actually get some metrics out of it, like actually analyze it properly? Like not at the moment, it's just been in our head and how we thought about it. But I think that's next stage is going, getting real data back, and then but doing it at a much like larger, a much larger pool of people using paid is probably the way I'm going to think about it. I think it's super important. I still really want it to be how the book's going to be done. I just realized that the human behavior was that they weren't going to give me what I wanted because I asked.
It's that thing of like, you can try something one way, and if it's not working, let's adjust. And it's kind of the same whether you're writing a book, whether you're running a business, whether you're getting feedback, any of that, right? Yeah. Cool. See, I'm interested to know if there is anything like, so we've talked a little bit about the journey from like kind of where the ideas started to where they are now and the feedback. Is there anything you've come around on that you really disagreed with at the start that maybe you do agree with now, or anything you still don't agree with?
Oh, contentious. I think, honestly, there's a couple of things here. And one of them is a feeling of, I occasionally reflect, Stan, on how long it's taken us to get to here. And I think, like, we've been on this journey quite a long time. We probably all envisaged we'd have this finished thing by now, and we haven't. But then when you say things like, you know, and I really think about the book we started writing, I was like, well, that was like a 4 or 5 month detour, probably. So really the actually getting into it stuff has come later. I think one of the things that I've found helpful, though, is I've tried to find some other voices as well as Stan's. So I was just reading, I'm halfway through reading and sticking on my little post-it notes on Gary V's Day Trading Attention. because I wanted to understand the context of like, where do these ideas sit and what are other people saying that we agree with, but also where can I find the differences in what you're saying and kind of elevate those as well. So, that a combination of Stan and probably Gary Vee, who I would have said is like a content for the sake of content, like just contributing to the noise and not always adding value, is kind of what I thought he advocated for. Going into his ideas, coupled with what you've kind of taught me, has really changed my view on, I guess, putting things out there. And I think also, I am a bit of a recovering perfectionist. So like, so your experimental attitude is quite inspiring to me as well. And I remember or kind of hear your voice sometimes in my head when I am, spinning my wheels with something. And so that's changed the way or the willingness that I have probably to put some ideas out too, even though I've been advocating for that for ages as well. I think what we do is way more aligned than I realized. Well, no, I did realize we're just coming at it from a really different way. And I think I value the short form as well as the long form, but it's not my comfort area. And you value long form, but you're really freaking good at short form. So it's taking some work to push you into a different format as well, just like I've had to work to push into that shorter format.
I think that is a real common. I think obviously that is the more normal thought process for you. Yeah, for sure. But I mean, if it wasn't, I wouldn't have a business, because like people don't want to experiment. They want to be seen as the expert. They want to always be seen as this great brand that's out there. And one of the things we all it's very big part of our pitches to clients now, is even all the big clients that we would pitch to, is that the advertising model was make a bunch of assumptions, build a campaign. And ours is experiment and then build a campaign. And that the difference is that your assumptions are based on 4 or 5 people sitting in a room who probably all look the same, feel the same, and have the same ideas, and their assumptions aren't realistic on what the audience is thinking. And so then they build a campaign that they can win an award on, or they can look really cool on. And that's great for a certain audience. But when you've got a brand that needs to speak to, you need to find all these people who look and feel differently. The reason why we do the experiment layer is that we know that that's going to be forgotten. That will only last for the time that it happens in, especially if you're a brand who's not like us, where we experiment lots for our clients' sake. But if your brand is just doing the experimental phase, and then you get into campaign building, now you've got a campaign built of maybe 100,000 people's ideas and feelings and thoughts, so that when you go to do this, it lands so much better. But people don't want to do that because they think this experimental is going to damage brand, and it just doesn't. Like, it just, we know that people just don't remember. They just don't. Like, it's the recency bias of branding is so strong, and you can see it with people who rebuild brands, and we forget. We forget how bad something they did was, or whatever. And there's plenty of examples out there in the media right now.
Cancel culture isn't really real, because people come back.
And I think that is an idea even in this book, or I think it's probably a second follow-up book, but it's kind of the whole thing of like, don't get overwhelmed by this process. Like, you just got to do it. And if you don't want to be as crazy as I am and experiment as crazy as I, just take smaller steps. Just take smaller steps that aren't so crazy. But if you don't get your audience feedback, who are you making the content for? Like, you're making it for you, or you're making it for them? You
can't do this sort of narrow focus group thing anymore. Or like, you think about, even if you did do a few focus groups versus what you were saying about potentially 100,000 people looking at it. The sample size is vastly different. So, there's way more insight there.
But I also think, like, you say people forget the experimental stage, but I also think, like, we see it with thought leadership, is people also trust you more when you acknowledge there's some uncertainty, or when you've messed up, or when you've done something that wasn't quite right, and then you own it and you just carry on. And it's like, nobody cares if you did something that wasn't great, if you're then like owning it and or showing how you've evolved.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's the scientific method, right? Like we wouldn't trust anything science or medical related if they didn't go through experimentation and like tested their ideas to make sure that they're right and that are willing to adapt because of it. And you're right, like people who have followed me for years on LinkedIn and stuff and whatnot who come, that's the most common thing they will say is that like we love watching you have built this and all the mistakes that you've made and all the lessons that you've learned, and even like seeing the way you talk about the same topic is so starkly different to how you used to talk about it. You must have learned so much. And of course I did. Like, you've seen how much I've done. Like, of course I've learned. It'd be naive to think I haven't. So and people trust me more for it. Like, I had a lady who's going through she's a prospect at the moment, and we first connected in 2019. So when I first moved back, I tried to, one of the many people I tried to get coffee with to try to do so. And we had like maybe 3 messages back and forth on LinkedIn, but nothing happened from it. But she had been watching the whole time. Like she'd been there watching, never knew never reached out anything. She's reached out recently because her business is in a position that like they're ready to do some stuff. And she's like, I don't even know what it is, but like I'll trust anything that comes out of your mouth. And I think that's a problem because you could sell me anything right now, but I've watched you grow and you got nowhere to hide, Stan. Like there's nowhere for you to hide here, and so I'll trust you to the moon back. Like whatever you want, like we're doing it. And I think like when we're service-based businesses, that's the only thing we're selling anyway. So I actually think like it's not for everyone. I don't think everyone can do or handle the negativity that I receive because I put so much out. But there definitely is an aspect of that trust gets built when people watch you work figuring stuff out for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And you've taken them with you.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
I think there's a big element of, like there's a lot of people in marketing and there's a lot of them that are very slick and you just look at them and you're like, it's all bullshit. like you're not going to get me the results that you're promising and you're not going to do this. And I think the reason that people trust you is because you've basically put everything out there that said like, well, this has worked and this hasn't worked and these are the mistakes I've made. And it's that trust element, right? It's people, I mean, it's so like cliche, but like people do business with people they like. Yeah. And like they're not necessarily doing most of the business with you when they're actually in working with you, but they trust that you've built something that they can trust, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think their defenses go down when you're imperfect as well. It's like what I was saying before about, like the skepticism when someone is slick and seems perfect and like they've figured it all out. You're like, what is that? Who are you trying to convince? Sort of.
The number of events that we've been to where like a speaker's been really, really slick and I've been like, oh, they were great. And Christina was like, oh, I hated them.
She's like, we've got to do that. We've got to join up to this thing. And
I'm apparently a sucker for slick.
Were we just at the same event? I tease her that she's going to end up accidentally joining a cult.
No. I'd like to clarify that I think I would start a cult, not join one.
Lead one.
Funny.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that. I think that too. Like, even with my brand, the trust has built over time. Obviously, like at the beginning, I wouldn't have trusted me. Like I was.
You were figuring it out.
You didn't really know what you were doing, right?
I was trying to figure it out, and I was managed. Like I figured out that I just needed to know one thing more than the person I was selling to, and as long as I knew that one thing more, I could add value to them. And then over time, like we just built more of it. But the trust that people have in us today, 5 years into the journey, is like exponentially more than what it was. Like it hasn't been a linear growth of trust. Like this particular lady who we're talking to now, like her trust. Like she said to me, she's like, I know I shouldn't trust you. But I do implicitly. Like anything you say, yes, and like that hasn't always been that way, but it has over time because they've been able to watch that. But when you do watch the slick, like it's almost the AI thing now that like if it's too perfect, you mustn't be real if you're too perfect.
Absolutely.
It's like the whole argument of the M- thing that's happening at the moment.
Oh my God.
Like it's that whole argument of like. You don't even know what that is, like how are you putting this in? But so if you're too perfect, it's almost I definitely can't trust you now that AI's come. So our like all the mistakes and all the thing that shows us how imperfect we are has definitely been the trust building for sure. And so I agree with you. Like if they're too slick, there's a snake oil somewhere here. That's kind of what I think. Yeah.
And also you've trusted as you've done all this experimenting that what you were saying about something wasn't the last thing you would ever say as well. Like you said, people would be able to reflect on how you talked about a particular topic now compared to before. I think there's a tie-in with that with authors as well, because there's a tendency to the printed, tangible, it's still sitting there, feels way more permanent in a printed book than it does in your posts, which are, they're replaced really quickly and they're down way further down the feed and that sort of thing quite fast. Whereas I think people can obsess over the details of the book and never finishing it.
Yeah.
And I constantly have to remind them, this isn't the last thing.
Yeah.
This isn't the last thing you'll ever say about this.
Yeah.
It's just a representation of like your best thinking on it now at this point in time.
Absolutely. Oh, I've thought about that specifically. I can't wait for the time where I can like fully shred my book apart. like what an idiot! Like, I can't believe he thought that all those years ago. Like, because I will, of course I will. There'll be obviously principles that don't change.
Yes.
The principles won't change, but like, and that's the reason why I'm okay to write the book still in the first place. But a lot of like the methods or stories will just be irrelevant. And like won't stand up to test of time. Like people look back and like, you idiot. Like,
I say so often to people, like, if you're not embarrassed by what you've put out previously, then you haven't bloody learned anything.
No, exactly.
Like, that's a bad sign.
Or
if
you've
you're
held
not
on and you've held it back for too long. And not been willing to like learn. So it's like the cringe that you have when you watch like old videos or something, and you're like, oh God, what the hell was I? Or you look at your website and you haven't updated it for ages, if you're one of those people. And you kind of like...
You say that as we're in the process of kind of needing to update ours at the moment.
We've been those people, absolutely. But in the beginning of Greg McKeown's second book, I'm sure I would have said this to you before, he basically takes issue with his first concept of essentialism. And then he says all the ways that he was like being the perfect essentialist and it still wasn't magic, like it wasn't working for him. But that's actually how he sets you up then for, I didn't like slam book 2 shut and go, oh, well, screw you. Like, you didn't know what you were talking about. I'm not reading this. No. You're actually like, so they're going, oh, like, yes, I see the need for what you're about to tell me now. Give it to me, sort of.
I think the same. So I've read both of those books and seen that too, and I also think the same with Jocko Willink's book when he wrote Extreme Ownership, and then everyone was like, "Yeah, it's too hardcore military." Blah, blah. And he's like, "Oh, you missed the points," but also, I explained it wrong. And then so he wrote Dichotomy of Leadership, which like kind of fixed his model because he realized, like of course that was very much. I'm a Marine. Like,
Not everyone's with me on that.
So this is it. And I think that's great. Like even Gary Vee in his books, he does the same thing. Like he understands that his principles haven't gone. Like nothing about attention being the world's currency has changed, but his methods for how he goes about it and what he thinks about has changed for sure. So I think the same. I can't wait for those days. I think it's going to be really funny. I think it's just a great piece of content, like author shredding his own book. Like, so cool.
We've definitely done a few like, look at what we wrote 10 years ago that's clearly insane. Why did we think that was a good piece of content at the time?
Our really early impressions of LinkedIn now are like, I'm sure we made a reference to a fax in there. Like how redundant could that have been?
Just shows how long we've been around.
This generation don't even know what faxes are.
Oh, I love it. Well, it's probably time for us to wrap up pretty soon, but I think one of the reasons why we were keen to have these conversations is because, honestly, we wanted to create more video content, and we were like, what's the way that we're going to be more comfy doing that? It's just going to be talking and having conversations. And I think it's one of the things that you've tapped into is how you kind of use conversations to get points across, whether that's in terms of using somebody as a thinking partner or in terms of actually like getting a message across. And I'm interested to know from you, like, so much of your content is you just talking to the camera. How do you feel about like, what do you get out of that for yourself personally versus something like having a conversation with someone in your podcast or your TikTok videos with your team and stuff? I think like there's a couple layers to peel back there. Like first of all, anyone listening, like this isn't this isn't an or question. It's definitely an and question. Like you don't do one over the other. I don't think. I think
when you look at my Instagram or my TikTok or whatever, it's definitely me talking to camera because I don't do that anywhere else. That's the only place I do it. Some people do just want that narrative to come across. When you're having conversations with people, for the one-on-one just with myself and the audience, it feels more personal for them to get an insight into the journey that I'm on. So that's the reason for that reason. And it doesn't need to be a dialogue. It needs to be them coming along and living vicariously through our experience. The conversation approach happens for me in multiple ways. Like if it's an interview style podcast, it's either two people solving an issue together and you're literally just doing a brainstorm together. And those are really cool podcasts. Drew, Knowles and I used to do that in our podcast, which is just us trying to figure things out together. And that's why we did it in the first place, because we'd have these discussions. I think that's really interesting because that's like solving a problem together on camera for other people to work through whilst you do it. But then the more interview style is that, for me anyway, when I'm doing these interview podcasts, it's allowing me to act as the audience to hear the story of this other person. And so the people who follow me have a similar like mindset or sort of worldview. If I can act as them, I'm asking the questions they wanted to find out from that person. There are questions that you guys are going to ask me today that make sense for your audience, and you'll act as that audience. But, I did one with Lighthouse Financial last week, and like those guys are asking me real detailed like finance sort of stuff, right? And like that would just not be right for you guys. So when you're in these sort of conversations, you get to act as the audience. You get to do something that they don't have access to be able to do and have a conversation they want. And you're having the conversation they would have had, but you're getting to do it for them. So then you get to be this person for them who can like give them access to people that they may not have been able to for whatever reason. So that's kind of how I think about it and the different reasons that you do it. The other point of doing interview podcasts, just from a branding perspective, is that you get to absorb the brand of the people you interview. So when you interview a certain type of people, like I interview creators on my podcast, I get to live in a world where everyone thinks that I'm the center of the creator world, because of that. And it's like everyone thinks that Stan must know the most about this creator world because he gets to talk to all the big creators. So I get to steal a little bit of all of their brands as I do it, but also a lot of the people watching are creators as well, and they want to talk to other creators, but they don't know them all. So I get to stand in for them and go, what's this question? How did you do that? I want to try to do that too, so can you teach us? Yeah.
It's awesome. I think it's one of the things I'm excited for this one, because it's like it gives you a reason to talk to people. And obviously there's some people like you that, we've known for years and are working with. And so it's very easy to be like, you want to do it?
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It'll give us the opportunity to talk to so many more people. And I think it's, we've created this really to talk about ideas and kind of thinking partners and challenging your thinking and stuff. And it's interesting to think about what you've talked about with experimenting, and it's like, okay, well, how can we experiment with this? So, is there in us having one of our arguments on camera? Maybe.
I'll pay to watch that.
Or what you were saying about actually figuring stuff out. I was like, we do lots of, our team workshop ideas heaps. So that would probably be really interesting to show people. And I've argued lots when we were trying to convince thought leaders to go out and talk about the thing that they were developing and figuring out and, trying to move a conversation forward on. And they're like, but I don't have all the answers yet. And I'm like, you can still get some really smart people together that also know about that thing, and you can facilitate a conversation. And it doesn't need to all be your ideas that you're pushing. Yeah. You'll still be seen as like leading or contributing to progressing that conversation just by virtue of pulling other thinkers together.
Absolutely.
So I think there's value in that too, which you're doing by talking to all those creators.
Exactly. Yeah, totally agree.
Cool. Well, thank you for joining us.
You. Thanks for having me.
Thanks to your team at The Attention Seeker, Connor, for recording and filming us. Appreciate coming to somebody else's studio and and using it. And thanks to you, whoever you are, if you are listening. Thanks a lot. And we'll see you on the next Intelligent Think.
Awesome. See ya.